of where people talk.
Hello, and welcome. My name is Travis Grew, Chair of the Libertarian Party of Wake County. We are glad to have you here. Thank you for coming. Like I said, you all are very beautiful. Once a month or so, we sponsor an event with one or more speakers. Tonight, we have 9. I'm talking about the 9 candidates running for Wake County Sheriff in 2022, who were gracious enough to agree to come talk to us about why they are running and how to do the job if elected. Let me just tell you something. It takes a lot of courage to get up here, run for office, and speak about different issues. I've done it twice, and it's not easy. Each of these candidates deserve the respect that you would want if you were in the same shoes and you were up here. So I thank you in advance for your cooperation with this. All we ask is that you respect each other, even when you fundamentally disagree with their positions. Is that okay? Clap if that's okay. I keep getting asked why the Wake Libertarians would sponsor a forum for candidates for sheriff when we don't have a libertarian running for that office. I'll tell you why. Our vision is a free, peaceful, and prosperous North Carolina, where every individual has the opportunity to pursue her, his, or their If you're listening on Zoom, you can write it in the chat room, or you can email me directly at chair@wakelp.org, and we're going to give the candidates another opportunity to respond, and we'll post their responses on our Facebook and YouTube page. So if one of the questions isn't answered to your satisfaction, you will still have a chance to ask those questions, okay? So we're limited on time tonight. Please be sure to tip the wait staff. They are working hard to make tonight possible. And give them a round of applause real quick. Thank you so much. They're gracious enough to let us come here every single week, and usually we're on the other side. So anytime you want to come hang out with the Libertarians, we're right over here. Following the event, they have given us the game room. So if we want to continue a conversation after 9, we can go to the game room, and they've given us that room, and we can stay there for as long as we want, okay? Remember, don't hurt people and don't take their stuff. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our moderator for tonight's forum. It is my pleasure to introduce my friend, Ken Pinkowski. Thank you so much for coming. If you need anything, let me know. Take it away, Ken.
Awesome, thanks. How about a round of applause for WakeLP Chair Travis Grew, please. Nice. So, just like Travis did, I'd like to welcome you to Libertarian Party of Wake County Sheriff's Candidate Forum. I'm Kenneth Pinkowski, your moderator, as Travis introduced. I also would like to welcome and thank each of the candidates for attending this evening. It is true that there's not a Libertarian who's currently running in the race for sheriff. Over 6 registered Libertarians in Wake County don't have an opinion about this race. In fact, as many of you know, if you ask a Libertarian for their opinion, you're likely to get several. Another thing you may know is that Libertarians tend to think about ideas as bedrock principles, and they think about big ideas. It's over 400 days until the election decides this contest. There'll be plenty of time to nitpick the candidates and nitpick their platforms. But it's my hope that the questions that are asked tonight and the dialogue that follows that helps all of us to acknowledge and understand some of the significant issues that we face surrounding law enforcement in our community. Issues around, as Travis put, how to build a free, peaceful, and prosperous Wake County for everyone. So the format for tonight's forum, after a short introduction, each candidate will be given 2 minutes to tell you a little more about themselves and the reason why they're running. We'll then move to questions on a really wide variety of topics. The candidates have not received the questions in advance, but the questions are very topical to the position they're running for and the factors that affect that position. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to respond to a question that's asked them. We do have a timer, flashcards periodically to give you an idea of where you're at in that 90 seconds. And also we have over 20 questions that have already been submitted by people online. And we have 9 candidates, so not every candidate will get a chance to answer every question. I will, however, try to give every candidate roughly equal total time tonight. And if a question was asked to another candidate and you'd like to answer the same question, we'll allow that. But of course, that'll kind of count against your total time. You got a bunch of cards here. I'm going to try to keep track of that. Also, it's the moderator's prerogative to ask follow-up questions. I just ask that you would keep answering, and that won't be counted towards your total time. And then I don't know if we have cards out there. If we have time, again, this is going to be a pretty tight program, but if we have, there might be some cards floating around. If someone from the audience has a question, if you could write it down and pass it up, then we can take a look at that. And if there's time, we can allow you to ask your question. So with that, those are kind of the ground rules. So I'd like to begin this evening with the brief introduction and then a short statement from each candidate. Again, we have 9 candidates. The order of these statements was decided at random. So I will announce each candidate, and then if they could use their microphone to give us a 2-minute introduction to themselves. So our first candidate this evening, again decided by random order, is Mr. Tivon Howard. Mr. Howard brings over 20 years of law enforcement experience and 6 years of service with the U.S. Army 82nd Airborne Division. If that weren't challenging enough, Mr. Howard is also a substitute teacher in the Wake County public school system. So with that, Mr. Howard, of course.
Good evening. I decided to become involved in the sheriff's campaign in 2020. I seen a need to step out there and to show that there are some good leaders in Wake County and that we can get things together and situated. I am here currently, happy to be here, and thank you guys for inviting me.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Our second candidate to introduce themselves this evening is Mr. Donny Harrison. From 2002 to 2018, Mr. Harrison was a 4-term Wake County sheriff. Before that, he served for 26 years as a North Carolina Highway Patrol officer in Wake County. Mr. Harrison, 2 minutes, please.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. And as you heard him say, I've been doing this for over 50 years, and why I'm back into it, because I'm like Tivon. There's a lot of stuff going on that we don't need to be going on. You need to be protected. And when the stuff downtown happened, you won't believe how bad I felt for the people downtown. It got me riled back up again. The good part about this election is you look around here, we've got people up here that know what they're talking about. And that makes me feel good because I know we're going to be in good hands, whoever wins this race. Ralph Stevenson sitting in the back there was a major when I came on the sheriff's office, probably taught me more than anybody else in the first beginnings of when I come in. But folks, let me tell you something. Law and order is what we need. If we don't have law and order in this country, we're going to go, I won't say the word, but we're going to go south. Let me just put it that way. It's just like our military. We've got to have law and order. We've got to have people respect. Do we make mistakes in law enforcement? Absolutely. My 50-something years, I made mistakes, and I'll probably make some more mistakes. But it's not because I want to, it's because I'm trying to do what's right for you and the men that work for law enforcement, especially the Wake County Sheriff's Office. Those guys and ladies go out there every day and put their life on the line. I know. I grew up very poor, wanted to be in law enforcement. God had a hand in it, and God keeps a hand in it. 1972, I was shot. Lucky to be here. Wasn't for God, I wouldn't be here in my training. So yes, I'm here, ready to go. We're going to fight hard to make sure you stay safe. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Our next candidate is Mr. Willie Rowe. Mr. Rowe is a U.S. Army veteran and a retired major from the Wake County Sheriff's Office with 28 years of service. Mr. Rowe, the floor is for 2 minutes.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you for your time. Also, thank you to the Libertarian Party for hosting this event and for all the comments involved. Thank you for all candidates for offering yourself to serve. I am Willie Rowe, candidate for Wake County Sheriff. I'm running for sheriff to restore public trust and confidence in sheriff office leadership, vision, and commitment to serve and protect, to increase staffing, to improve morale, to reduce crime, and to enhance public safety. Build trusted relationships and to establish open and honest communication with the community at large. I'm running for sheriff because your safety matters. Everyone deserves equal protection under the law and the opportunity to pursue the American dream. Thank you again for your time, and God bless you.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe. All right, our next candidate is Mr. Joe Coley. With roots in eastern Wake County, Mr. Coley has been a farmer, a small business owner, a Wake County detention officer, and a sheriff's deputy, both at the courthouse and as a patrol officer. Mr. Coley, 2 minutes.
Thank you, sir. I'm Joe Coley, and like he said, I was raised here in Wake County. I went to school here in Wake County. I've been a small business owner in Wake County and a farmer in Wake County. I started my law enforcement career with Sheriff Harrison here at the Wake County Jail. After that, he was good enough to let me go through the academy where I became a deputy. And I finished up with the sheriff's office as a patrol deputy on the eastern side of Wake County. I love this county, and I want to make sure everyone's safe and free to work, live, enjoy Wake County. And if I'm your next sheriff, that's exactly what's going to happen. Thank you.
And the candidates keep rolling. Our next candidate is Ms. Stephanie Hopkins. Much like your humble moderator, Ms. Hopkins was born in Ohio and is a North Carolinian by wise choice. If you don't think she's as tough as nails, you should know that she began her law enforcement career in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, which is just as onerous as it sounds. Ms. Hopkins, 2 minutes to you.
Hi, yeah, thank you. I first want to thank Travis and Patrick and the moderator for inviting us. I think that's the libertarian way, by getting everyone that's different together to give their opinions and voices and have ideas. I will say, you know, all of us are looking for some kind of change. However, certain people up here are looking for more of a progressive change, and that is not what I'm looking for. I think that we need to get back to basics, and we need to go back to the typical American fundamentals, and we need to govern through the Constitution. It's as simple as that. Also, just a little bit about myself. I know I didn't tell you too much. I am a former law enforcement officer. I am also a former corrections officer, and I'm also a nurse. I do not believe in medical mandates, so I was just terminated as a nurse from one of my positions, and I refuse to give in to medical mandates. Now, job be damned, I would never do that, and I would never force that upon anyone. I don't think that that's fair. But I do want you folks to pay close attention tonight. Pay attention to what the responses are. Pay close attention of what everyone is saying, and take it to heart. We don't want to take anything for granted. And you have to remember, per the Constitution, your sheriff is the last line of defense. So make sure you vote the right one in.
Our next candidate is Mr. Tommy Matthews. Mr. Matthews spent a career at the Wake County Sheriff's Office, following in the footsteps of his grandfather, who was a 26-year Wake County Deputy Sheriff. Mr. Matthews, 2 minutes to you.
Thank you to the Wake County Libertarian Party. I appreciate the invite, and I appreciate everybody being here tonight. As noted, my name is Tommy Matthews. I've lived in Wake County my entire life, and I'm also a lifelong Democrat. I have served both under Democrat and Republican sheriffs throughout my long career. I started out as a civilian in communications and moved quickly to being a deputy sheriff, and then progressed in most of my career in the criminal investigation division for over 25 years. And I made a retirement from the sheriff's office in 2004. And I took a year's leave to go overseas to help train police officers, to help them understand what it means to police in a humanitarian manner. I came back, started a new family at age 57. I got a 10-year-old boy now. And the schools are dear to me too in this county, great schools. I came back to work at our office under Sheriff Harrison. Appreciate it. And I took the job as the assistant director in the Wake County Detention Center. During my law enforcement career as a deputy sheriff, that was the last place I'd ever envisioned myself being, in the detention center. It was a blessing from God that I went there, and for 4 years I learned a tremendous amount of information about treating people humanely, fairly. More than that, you're protecting the detention officers and the other staff that work in that jail with them. I cannot imagine being a detention officer in a dorm by yourself, watching over and monitoring up to 55 inmates on a daily basis for a 12-hour shift. My hats are off to these individuals. So everything we do for the inmates is done to protect them. Appreciate the time tonight and hope to talk to you later on.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. Our next candidate is Mr. David Blackwelder. Mr. Blackwelder serves as a community police officer and the president of the Wake County chapter of the North Carolina Sheriff's Police Alliance. He holds a bachelor's degree in criminal justice, a master's in public administration, and a Juris Doctorate. Mr. Blackwelder.
All right, like you said, I'm a lawyer. I was a police officer for a very long time, but like you said, I got my Juris Doctorate and became a lawyer. That doesn't change for my passion for law enforcement and for fighting for what's right. So for example, I worked with the county commissioners to get the gun range back open in Holly Springs when it was shut down. I had the full board, they're all sitting Democrat side with me over the current Democrat. I've never been elected. And if I can do it, you can do it. Okay. So the overall mission is public safety over politics, right? Politics should not get in the way of what you have to do. And that means working with all sides to be able to get what needs to be accomplished. Okay? So I've stood up for the Second Amendment. I've gone to bat for that. I've worked with others that are here included that we have sued after he decided to no longer do gun permits. And like I said, I've done this without being elected ever. And so I just encourage everyone here to definitely listen to everybody and decide on what you want. Do you want somebody that's going to work and that's going to be a man of action or a woman of action? Or do you want somebody that's just going to play politics? Because I'm not one that's going to play politics.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blackwelder. Our penultimate candidate for introduction is Mr. Randy Beatty. Mr. Beatty has a career in county, private, and municipal law enforcement. In 2002, he became a Wake County Sheriff Deputy and is currently an officer with the Clayton Police Department. Mr. Beatty, 2 minutes to you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the Libertarian Party. I'm honored to be here. Thank you for the invite. Thank you to all those who worked so hard to put this together. I really appreciate that. I don't like to talk about myself because it's not about me, it's about you. That's why my platform is service over self, SOS. Wake County is in distress. I'm here to relieve that. We need new leadership. We need strong leadership. We need leadership, not a tyrant. So I'm going to do what I'm asked to do, Mr. Moderator, and tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Randolph Beatty. This is my 20th year in law enforcement. Served as a Wake County deputy for 17 years. And the capacities that I served is courthouse, patrol, judicial, specialized unit, such as domestic violence unit, sex offender unit. And my last assignment was criminal investigations on the southwest side of the county. I just want to say thank you again. This is a very humble experience for me. I'm not a politician, I'm a law enforcement officer. I fight for you. I fight for fellow officers. That's who I fight for. Thank you.
Thank you. Our ninth candidate this evening is Mr. Roy Taylor. With over 40 years of law enforcement experience, Mr. Taylor is a former Wake County Sheriff Deputy, current Chief of Police, and Lieutenant Colonel in the U.S. Army Reserves. Mr. Taylor also holds a doctorate in criminal justice. Mr. Taylor, 2 minutes.
Thank you, and I appreciate the Libertarian Party putting this together. I also want to thank all the candidates for stepping up and taking this onerous trip where you're subject to all kinds of ridicule and degradation, but it's important that we get out here and change things. We know that Wake County doesn't change, and what we have to have is a leader. And you heard from the introduction, I've served as a chief of police for 26 years and in law enforcement for 40 years. When you're evaluating your candidates, you need to look at the range of experience they had. The Wake County Sheriff's Department employs over 1,000 people. The budget is over $100 million. You cannot have somebody that does not have executive management experience, leadership in a position that way. That's a problem we have right now. You cannot put somebody that's been a line level employee in charge of such a big agency. And you might think, well, it's just a law enforcement agency. Well, it's not. You heard Mr. Matthews talk about how difficult it is working in the corrections industry. As a lieutenant colonel in the military police, my last 2 assignments were to make sure that prisoner of war camps and detention barracks were run according to the Constitution and the Geneva Convention. So I have that experience in corrections. I have a PhD in criminal justice. I use statistics and not just act off of gut reactions. I get questions all the time on Facebook and other forums about how are you going to rule, how are you going to act constitutionally? We're going to act according to the law, and we're going to use statistics to guide our decision-making processes. So I look forward to this evening, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. So these are our 9 candidates. We'll now move to questions. I'll start with the questions that were submitted in advance. And the first question I'd like to direct to Mr. Harrison because he is actually mentioned in the question. Again, we're not nitpicking. It's actually in a positive light. The question is, in 2018, then Sheriff Donny Harrison, a Republican, called for increased use of body cameras. In 2020, Sheriff Gerald Butler, a Democrat, secured a $200,000 federal grant to equip even more deputies with body cameras. Body cameras does not seem to be a partisan issue. Do you believe that body-worn and in-car cameras make interactions safer for both law enforcement officers and the public? And would you support their continued and expanded use?
Absolutely. I think that's something that we need, every one of us need. I even wanted in the jail. I hope they've got some in the jail. I don't know that for a fact, but Tommy will tell you the same thing. I just got to take a moment of privilege. Everybody that was with the Wake County Sheriff's Office, will you raise your hand? It makes me proud, folks. I'm not trying to get a point in, but I'm just proud of these guys. Please raise your hand. I'm serious. But anyway, yes, the answer to your question, I won't take time, but yes, I am all for body cameras, 100%.
Great, thank you very much. Continuing on that theme, also with body cameras, I'd like to ask Mr. Rowe the next question. In 2016, when state laws around body cam footage were passed by wide margins and across party lines, they were characterized as a compromise, requiring a court order for the release of footage. Earlier this year, that compromise was called into question, and new bills were filed in the General Assembly to require release within 48 hours after request. Would you or would you not support this change, Mr. Rowe?
Yes, I would. You know, the thing you have to think about is to make sure that you don't compromise the investigation. If any of you were a victim of a crime, or even the perpetrator, you want to make sure your rights are protected. So we have to guard the information and make sure that we release it in a timely manner. We need to let the family know what's going on, keep the communication open, but we also need to make sure that when it comes time for prosecution, that we can get a jury that can fairly either convict or acquit the person based off the evidence. So we don't want to do anything that's going to harm the evidence in the sense of the integrity of the investigation. But we need to share information.
Thank you. And I'd also like to redirect that question to Mr. Blackwelder, especially given your legal background. What are your thoughts about changes to body cam footage being released in 48 hours instead of the normal court order process?
So I just going off of what he is saying, you cannot jeopardize the investigation, and it would also depend on who is able to receive that footage. If you are part of it, like you are the victim or something like that, or the perpetrator, and you have an discovery anyways, I think you should be entitled to it within those 48 hours. However, I think if it's just the general public and it's an ongoing investigation, they should not be able to have access to it. So, because typically a person, if you are a victim or if you are arrested, you would be able to have access to it regardless. So it makes sense to allow them to have it in 48 hours. Also, too, if you don't have access to it, some policies and some departments will delete it after 30 days. So in order of justice, I think it's important that they be able to go ahead and have that video to defend themselves, or even to, if you're a victim, to be able to get justice for yourself. And that's just my stance on it.
Great, thank you very much. The next question I'd like to be addressed by Ms. Hopkins. This continues our theme of transparency and accountability in law enforcement. In a unanimous 2009 U.S. Supreme Court opinion, Justice Samuel Alito wrote, "Qualified immunity balances two important interests: the need to hold public officials accountable when they exercise power irresponsibly, and the need to shield officials from harassment, distraction, and liability when they perform their duties reasonably." But since the fabrication of this doctrine in 1967, it's been increasingly difficult to, quote, hold public officials accountable, as several incidents in 2020 and 2021 have shown. Should changes to qualified immunity be included in discussions around criminal justice and policing reform? Ms. Hopkins, 2 minutes or 90 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, someone else just recently asked me this question not too long ago. And my response to him was, if it's wrong in God's eyes, it's wrong in my eyes. I think that, it needs to be looked at in that perspective as well, in a huge way. But as far as, with everything that's been taking place, the last 18 months, especially the last 5 years, I mean, we're seeing definitely a different situation. It's, this isn't 1967 anymore. So it's a little bit different of a time now. So yeah, it should be looked into a little further. Yeah.
Thank you. I'd also like Mr. Howard to address the same question about qualified immunity. Do you think that should be part of our discussion about how we continue to evolve our law enforcement goals.
I think it should be a part of the discussion, but let's take in mind that the officer has to be protected if they're doing their job correctly. And what does that mean by doing their job correctly? That means if they follow their policies and procedures, if they arrested properly, and if they done what they were supposed to do. So many times they come in and question qualified immunity when the officer's done what he's supposed to do, but at the same time, the public did not like the way it was done. And so therefore, you have to have some kind of discussion and some kind of talks between the public and how you want us to police the situation. So yes, I definitely agree with it, but also we have to take in mind that if the guys do their job correctly, it needs to be protected as well.
Thank you very much. I'd like to direct our next question to Mr. Taylor. Again, continue with our theme of accountability and transparency. The Wake County Sheriff's Office lists core values of integrity, accountability, transparency, and consistency. Aspiring to uphold these values, would you support an independent citizens review commission with the capacity to investigate and recommend corrective action in instances of alleged deputy misconduct? Mr. Taylor.
Yes, with different limits. They would really not have investigative authority, and we would have to appoint a board of people that undergo training and understand proper police procedures. It's just like we were talking about with qualified immunity. Sometimes law enforcement officers have to use force. One of my many positions is I'm an expert witness in federal court, and I've done over 146 cases in the last 5 years investigating civil rights violations, 70% for plaintiffs, 30% for law enforcement. So there unfortunately are times when law enforcement oversteps their bounds, they do violate people's rights. We do have to hold them accountable, and that's where policies and procedures come in. I have a police department defending their officers. They have a civilian review board with investigative authority, and I would actually get 2 separate reports, one from internal affairs and one from their civilian accountability office. And I think it works, but you just have to make sure that they would answer to the chief and maybe the county manager, but in this situation, the sheriff is an elected official. So it makes it a little bit different than a law enforcement agency such as a city municipality. But I would like to have transparency. I want to uphold citizens police academies and things again, so that we understand why law enforcement officers sometimes use force, and it's not always a pretty situation. But thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I'd like to ask Mr. Beatty to also address this question. Do you believe that an independent citizens review commission could have a positive effect on community relations for law enforcement? Mr. Beatty?
Yes, I do believe that it would have a significant impact. I say that, and I will say this, we have to be very selective. This is a hard time for law enforcement. So if people outside citizens, you have to find out what their intentions are. But I'm in favor for that selection.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beatty. I'd like to direct our next question to Mr. Coley, again on the theme of accountability and transparency. After too many harrowing stories, a North Carolina House bill to prohibit no-knock raids was filed in April of this year. Would you support this ban on no-knock raids, or do you feel that they're an important tool to have available to law enforcement?
I do feel that they're very important for law enforcement and the safety of the community. There are certain times with certain individuals that, especially in like close quarters and let's say apartment buildings and such, I just can't support them. I do understand why people don't like them, and in the past where it's been a problem, but I just feel like a lot of times for the safety of the public and officers involved, that there are certain times when they are warranted and that they're needed. And I don't want to do away with them completely as they're right.
And Mr. Cole, if I could ask a follow-up question to that, then what safeguards would you recommend to prevent mistakes and unintended consequences that sometimes range from frightening to deadly?
Well, a lot of that has to do with training. I mean, you have to train your officers right. You have to have good officers to begin with. And if you train them right, a lot of that is, won't happen. And it's easy to get around. Training is the best thing.
Thank you very much. Our next topic, we have one question that I know that Wake detention centers represent about 50% of the Wake County Sheriff's budget. So it's an important function that the Wake County Sheriff should oversee. My next question is for Mr. Matthews, since you spent time as an officer in the detention facilities. The question is, and if you'll allow me a little bit of privilege here, Dostoevsky said that you can judge a society by how well it treats its prisoners. Detention centers, the sheriff's office, use the tax dollars and the good name of the people of Wake County. Is the status quo there good enough, or should steps be taken to increase accountability and transparency related to facility operations and staff at these centers?
Question and answer.
Matthews.
Wow.
No, they're in a
County jail.
question and answer with the
operating
candidates.
Very, very
Live.
good. Unfortunately, the last 2-3 years, there's been such a depletion of personnel that they're well over 100 short, which is called upon now for deputy sheriffs to come into that jail and work as detention officers. Most of these deputy sheriffs are not trained or certified as detention officers. They have 1 year to do so. They don't know the proper protocols in dealing with inmates. Plus, they're not being given any field training for up to 30 days on how to follow and learn what to do in that jail with inmates, especially on how to de-escalate volatile situations in the dorms. There's been a rise and increase in a number of workman comp claims that are having to fulfill because of the assaults. But by far, the county's taxpaying dollars are doing well. The biggest issue in there is we have more mental health inmates in that jail than Central Regional Hospital does in Granville County. We know that by psychotropic drugs administered alone, we have 330. We did at the time I left in 2018 on a daily basis. 330 that are getting psych drugs. That's not the other mental illnesses. That's a big problem we have to deal with. I'd like to discuss this at the arcade after we get through. Thank you.
I thought you might have a lot to say about that. Thank you very much. Great. So our next topic for this evening is one that actually was brought up in the introductions and one that many of us have spent time looking at over since 2018's election, which is the issuance of pistol permits. And so my first question, I'd like to give this question to Mr. Taylor. Many have noted that the current North Carolina pistol permit system has its roots in Jim Crow era racial bias. Recent studies even indicate that there are racial disparities that still exist in the issuing of pistol permits. In an effort to remove systems that inherently result in inequity, did the governor get it wrong by vetoing a bill that would eliminate county-level pistol permits?
No, he didn't. And let me tell you why. There's one reason. You heard how Mr. Matthews talked about the number of people with mental illness in jail. The issue with taking away the pistol permit from the sheriff is there's no way to do a proper background investigation about the mental health issues. If you fill out your federal government form that said, have you ever been adjudicated as mentally deficient or been incarcerated or a part of a mental hospital? The NIC check does not have access to those mental health files. Those mental health files are locked away in the clerk's office, and it takes somebody to actually go over there and do a name search. Has Roy Taylor ever been in this file? And if it's not, then I'm good to go. But if I have lied and falsified that document and I have been put in a mental home or I've been adjudicated as mentally deficient, then I shouldn't have a pistol. That's my only issue with it. I think if that was overcome, then allowing the NIC check to take over at the dealership is fine. I don't think there should be any disparity. I'm going to work very hard. If I have to work in that office myself We're going to make sure the pistol permits are issued within the 14 days as required. We're going to make sure the concealed carry permits are issued as they're required. And we're going to open up the range so that people can have additional advanced training by the sheriff's office and help them understand the dangers and the proper way to handle a firearm. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to ask the same question to Mr. Rowe. Do you believe obviously there have been a few bills in the General Assembly that have tried to eliminate the sheriff's issuing of pistol permits. Do you believe the sheriff should continue to perform that function, Mr. Rowe?
Yes, I do. First of all, I support the Second Amendment and the legal and responsible ownership and possession of weapons. However, we must have safeguards in place. And as Mr. Taylor alluded to, when we're dealing with people who have like the mental capacity, we need to make sure that the weapons are in responsible hands. Yes, we need to find a way to be more efficient and make sure that they are issued in a timely manner. I support it. Permits, making sure everybody gets it in a timely manner so they can possess the weapons legally and responsibly.
Thank you, sir. Then continuing along our theme of pistol permits, I'd like to direct a question to Ms. Hopkins. Ms. Hopkins, currently there are 18 of these here in the United States and several more on the way, which protect the rights of citizens to carry a firearm without a government issued permit, regardless of that firearm being openly visible or concealed. Earlier this year, a bill was introduced to the North Carolina General Assembly allowing for the same. Would you support or oppose the elimination of concealed carry permits replaced by what has been called, quote, constitutional carry?
So there are 28 other states. Now, there are 28 other states. I would love for North Carolina to become number 29 that do that. I think that there's, too much government is too much government. No, I don't like too much government. I should have the right to protect myself and to protect my family and walk into a gun store and purchase a gun. I shouldn't need your permission. I don't need you to sign something off for me. I don't want anything from you. I'm a law-abiding citizen. I can walk in and purchase a handgun and walk out in 3 hours. That's the way it should be. That's the American way. If you're mentally disturbed or whatever, where are you going to a gun store? You're not going to walk into a gun store. You're going to walk behind Joe Schmo's house who's going to sell it to you for $100. They're going to get the gun no matter what. They're not going to walk in and say, I need to do this the right way. Criminals don't do that the right way. Law-abiding citizens do.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hopkins. Mr. Harrison, I'd like to ask you the same question. You spent a lot of time as Wake County Sheriff overseeing the concealed carry permit. Would you oppose the bill has been filed in the NCGA to eliminate that?
I'd have to know more about it. When I say that, I'm not trying to curve, but just like Roy said, years ago, I tried to get the NICS checks to cut out some of our pistol permits because I felt like we were overburdened, not making any money. It's not good for the citizens paying the kind of money that they were paying. Then I did my homework and found out, just like Roy said, Mr. Taylor said, there's people that we were missing because we could not touch them. I agree with what she's saying, that good people are not going to go through they're going to go through the process like they're supposed to. The bad guys are not going to go through it. But being in law enforcement as long as I have and knowing what I know, I'll have to read that bill very carefully before I would say yes. But I am a Second Amendment guy. I grew up poor. I know what it's like to hunt for food. So I'm all for people having guns. I'll tell you that. She's got one and the rest of my family's got one. So I'm all for it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harrison. Let's keep the peanut comments about our current sheriff to a minimum, please. Mr. Grew. I think that was a wonderful and spirited discussion that we had about pistol permits. But what I'd like to do is move on to a topic called anti-commandeering, which is the use of local resources in service of either state or federal aims. And so the first question I'd like to ask to Mr. Howard, the stated mission of the Sheriff's Office is in part to, quote, protect and preserve people, end quote. If the sheriff's office were asked by federal or other state agencies to assist in actions that contravene those rights, what would be your response, Mr. Howard?
My response is I can't do it, and I'll tell you why. The Constitution states, for the people, by the people. We cannot forget that. Liberties are getting taken away all day long, constantly being taken away. If they take an inch, they'll take a mile. So therefore, you cannot mess with people's liberties. It's enough is enough. So no, I would not violate anybody's constitutional rights, period.
Thank you very much, sir. And great job reading a libertarian audience. I'd like to ask Mr. Coley a similar question. Should county sheriff's office resources, including personnel, be made available to federal agencies for the enforcement of federal policy? Repeat that for me. Sure. Should the resources, including personnel, of the Wake County Sheriff's Office be used by federal agencies for the enforcement of federal policy?
The only time I could see that that would be okay would be a public safety matter. Can you hear me better? All right, sorry. If it comes down to public safety, then I would say yes. If it's anything as far as like Mr. Howard was saying, infringing on rights, the Constitution or anything, I couldn't go with it. But I'm all about public safety. So if it came down to them needing our local resources in a public safety matter to keep our public safe, then yes, I would.
So follow-up question, is there an example that might come to mind? If not, that's fine. You're kind of on the spot, but
I mean, really, seriously, just anything that's a public safety matter that the federal, you have U.S. Marshals Task Force, things like that. If they have some federal detainers, federal warrants, and they need our assistance with, then yes. But if it's not a public safety matter, then I can't see doing it.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Blackwelder, I'd like to ask you a similar question, especially with your unique perspective on laws, being a lawyer. Should resources controlled by the Wake County Sheriff's Office be used in service of federal agencies enforcing federal policy?
Well, typically, when you are at service with the federal government, they will give you money or give you manpower to carry out certain laws. And I think the underlying issue that we're kind of dancing around is working with ICE, okay? Typically, yes, I would work with ICE. I think that is very important. However, I think that the terms of the agreement, because it's kind of like a contract, you need to have something in place to maintain your sovereignty. Because like everyone is saying, you don't want to be beholden to them where you're actually an arm of the federal government. You're basically being a puppet, so to speak. No, we need to have our own stuff. But if it is a matter of public safety, like I think we can all agree as child molester, they probably need to be deported. Okay. I think we can all agree if it's a murderer, they very much need to be deported. They're not here to make a better life. They're here to victimize Americans. And that I have a problem with. So yes, absolutely, I would work with the federal government. And two, yes, I would take some of our tax dollars back to increase our available resources. Why wouldn't you do that? That is the money we're already paying as taxpayers. Why not get it back to have us have a larger department and more resources available? All right.
Thank you very much. Working with ICE, I'd like to direct the next question to Mr. Beatty. In 2018, current Wake County Sheriff Gerald Baker, current Wake County Sheriff Gerald Baker canceled an agreement on custody transfers to the Federal Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. Mr. Beatty, do you support that decision to cancel that agreement?
Absolutely not. I do not support that decision. I think it's the wrong decision. I think we should be working with federal agencies. It only build resources for the people. I'm all for it. When we talk about federal policies, it depends on what policies you're speaking of. I'm not for all federal laws, but I do support. I took an oath as an officer. When I took that oath, I did not say I'm going to enforce these laws and not these. I didn't get that selection. So as a law enforcement officer, I fully support and will work with state, local, and federal agencies.
Thank you, Mr. Beatty. I have a follow-up question very quickly. Is there any case in Wake County? Sorry, did I make a mistake there? We good? All right, sorry. Is there a case where the citizens of Wake County could bar the sheriff's office from providing resources to a federal agency?
The citizens?
If, for example, if there are a referendum and the citizens of Wake County bar the sheriff's office from providing assistance to a federal agency, whether it be ICE or the EPA, for example, would that be a legitimate way to stop the sheriff's office from complying with that federal agency?
No, it wouldn't. It is a good question, but in my humble opinion, I say no. Like I said, I'm here to uphold the law, state, federal, and local government. I'm here to uphold those laws no matter what. If it doesn't sound right, then it's not right to me. And I'm going to do what's right.
Thank you. So moving on to our next topic, but I think it segues very nicely into the discussion we are having. This relates specifically to the war on drugs. My next question is to Mr. Matthews. Also relates to resources of the sheriff's office, recognizing that the sheriff's office does not make law. There's still some discretion around how sheriff's office resources are prioritized. What should the sheriff's office priorities be related to the possession and consumption of illegal drugs? There is no victim. Mr. Matthews.
Ooh. Early in my career, I worked in the drug division section. And our top priority by far had nothing to do with personal consumption. There's too many people out there trafficking. I don't talk about marijuana, cocaine, which is a big thing in my time. Now it's come on with crack cocaine, and special laws were passed to deal with special product of cocaine. We've seen how such a disparity has occurred with that law. Now we got methamphetamines and stuff like that. The resources need to be dealt with. It's like you're trying to keep it abated. You're not going to win, but you've got to keep it in check. Drugs cost money. These people using drugs are going to break into your house and steal what you've got and take it and sell it. They're going to find a gun in the meantime. They're going to go out and rob somebody with it. Hopefully they don't kill anybody, but they're likely going to get somebody hurt or killed. And so we need resources. That's why we work with some federal agencies, U.S. Marshals Task Force and the DEA and the ATF to keep illegal guns off the streets and hardcore drugs off the street. The biggest problem in that jail now is heroin. Heroin. When they come in there, most are ready to die. And we need to fight that.
Thank you very much, sir. Continuing with our discussion of the war on drugs and the priorities of the Sheriff's Department, I'd like to ask Ms. Hopkins, as we've seen an increasing number of states legalize some drugs, those drugs remain prohibited by federal law. Although I feel that North Carolina may personally be one of the very last states to do so, bills have been introduced in the legislature that would count us among those states that legalize things like marijuana. The Sheriff's Office prioritize enforcement when state and federal policies contradict, specifically related to drugs. Ms. Hopkins.
You would ask me this, wouldn't you? But I see a police officer being killed over something as simple as a joint, you know. Me personally, I have family members who require medical due to pain, cancer. it's a very touchy subject for me, as far as that goes. But if you want a direct answer as far as how I feel, because it is personal to me, I honestly don't know how to answer that without bringing my personal experience into it. Yeah, I don't know. Me personally, I don't see anything wrong with helping people medically with marijuana. I see nothing wrong with it. That's just how I feel.
Thank you. So I'd like to move on to our next topic, which is civil asset forfeiture. I'd like Mr. Harrison to address the next question, which is, while North Carolina expressly prohibits the seizure of personal assets, the John Locke Foundation finds, quote, equitable sharing, which is a government partnership program, makes it possible for North Carolina law enforcement agencies to circumvent due process and property rights protections. To what extent does the Wake County Sheriff's Office participate in federal adoption or investigation asset programs, and should those policies continue? Mr. Harrison.
The way we participate it is a court order. We have papers down from the courts, regardless of what it is, before we go into any house or before we have that right once we have those papers in our hand. But until we have those papers in our hand, no, I don't agree with it. I think if we're covered by the courts and have the paper from the judge or whoever it may be, yes, 100%. Is it dangerous? Yes. Ask Sergeant Waller. But that's a job that we have to do. A lot of people don't understand the amount of time that we spend in civil service, civil process, and the sheriff's office is the one that does it. But yes, when we had the proper backing, but if we don't have the proper backing, no, we're not going. I can assure you that.
All right, thank you, Mr. Harrison. Mr. Beatty, I'd like to ask you the same question. Should participate in any adoption or joint investigation asset forfeiture programs?
I say they should participate in those programs. When you talking about, I've worked for the sheriff's office. I've never worked in executions before. My experience with executions is very limited. What I do know that you do have to have a court order in order to seize people's property and go forward from there. I think they should continue that procedure.
Thank you. Then one more question on this topic to Mr. Rowe, please. Would you support strengthening anti-circumvention clarifications at the county or state level that would close the equitable sharing loophole, which again is forfeiture, which is currently illegal under North Carolina law, except in cases where the federal government allows it?
Well, I think that you have to look at public safety in totality, and there are cases where the resources from the federal government is important for us to investigate cases. In those cases, a lot of time in drug cases, you end up seizing property from drug dealers. And it's important to take those tools away from them so they can't commit other crimes, and also take the fruits of their crime away from them too, because a lot of times that encourage other people to participate in that crime because they see the lifestyle that a particular drug dealer is living and they want to ease the way out. So, but we have to have a total approach. We have to address the demand for drugs or any type of illegal activity so that we can work together collectively. If we can reduce the crime and the temptation to commit it, then we can reduce the enforcement side. I spent 17 years in drugs, and one of the things I found out when you debrief a person, you ask them, how they committed the crime, where, when, but the most important question was why. And when you asked the why and you got these answers, you saw it was to fill a particular need, whether it was an addiction, sometimes for attention or whatever. So we got to work together as a community to make sure that
we address the needs of people so they don't have to resort to crime to take care of themselves.
Thank you very much, sir. A little bit of applause for that one. I'd like to go on to another topic related to maybe a more administrative aspect of the job, which is budget and finance. I'd like to ask this question to Mr. Blackwelder. Related to budget and finance, the Wake County Sheriff's budget is over $100 million annually. Roughly half is dedicated to detention and the other half for enforcement. That budget is adopted by the Wake County Board of Commissioners and funded through taxes paid by Wake County property owners. If elected, what, if any, changes would you recommend to budget allocation in future years?
Well, obviously, I would like to see the detention staff, and particularly because they're on the lower tier, that they get bumped up in pay. Obviously, the deputies need to be bumped up in pay. Right now, if you look at the current budget, you see where the sheriff has kind of created this top-heavy approach where these people are making upwards to $100,000 or more. Right there to pay for at least 2 officers, okay, or kind of somewhere in there, at least contribute. So I would like to see the officers get more, maybe taper down up top. You know, there's always changes, especially with vehicles. You know, like I know the current sheriff drives like a $90,000 Suburban, I'm told. I would purposely, just because of that, drive the baddest, worst shaped car ever just to prove a point. Okay, I get the Crown Vic that's like from 30 years ago. Okay, you know, just to prove a point. All right. So I think that just being budget friendly and using that for the betterment of your staff, because ultimately, like I think all of us agree, police are under attack. They're not appreciated. They deserve to be paid more for what they're doing. You know, when I started law enforcement, I was chasing armed gunmen in the woods for $16 an hour. Okay, that just shot somebody. Okay, I could go be a manager at Sheetz or Dollar General and make more money than that. Okay, so I think it's important that we pay value, we'll get better candidates and have a better service as a result of that.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask the same question to Mr. Taylor. Mr. Taylor, if elected, what changes would you recommend to the budget allocation for Wake County Sheriff's Office?
Municipal law enforcement agencies, they have a line item budget that tells exactly what you're allowed to spend that money on. The Wake County Sheriff gets a lump sum, and he is responsible for doling it out through salaries, vehicles. But the things I want to look at are programs to help inmates so that we reduce recidivism in the jail. If we reduce recidivism in the jail, if we move the people that have mental illness, and 60% of people in jail do have mental illness, according to statistics, if we can get them into the mental health system, we can actually level off the budget and not require more of your tax money to operate the sheriff's office, because we'll have lesser expenses in the jail and work across all spectrums of the government to work together. I believe in community policing, but I also believe in community government. And I'll work closely with the Board of Commissioners and all the other county agencies so that we can reduce our budget. And I will be cost friendly. Like David said, I don't expect to have a $90,000 Suburban. I'm going to drive a marked patrol car just like everybody else. Thank you.
So that's the budget that is allocated to the Wake County Sheriff. I'd like to ask.
I'd like to say something if I could.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Please.
So yeah, Mr. Blackwelder did make a good point that he rides around in a $100,000 Hummer or whatever it is. It's bulletproof. So that's going to be auctioned off and put back into the budget. The current sheriff also makes $185,000 per year. Just to put that into perspective, it's $100,000 per year, and that's to govern the state. So upon my election, I'm requesting an $85,000 pay cut, and that's going to go back into the budget. And I'll be making more average. The sheriff would make more officers in. Another thing, the jail, you don't need honey buns and ho-hos in prison. I don't want to make it comfortable time and time again because we make it so comfortable for them. The canteen is going to be stripped down to necessities only. So that's one of my things.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hopkins. And then continuing on the theme of budget and finance, I'd like to ask Mr. Howard about some expenditures that the Sheriff's Department has recently made. His records from 2018 to 2020 indicate that the Wake County Sheriff's Office has actually shown some reasonable restraint in the use of taxpayer dollars, including in those purchases exactly 0 mine-resistant vehicles, 0 Black Hawk helicopters, 0 bayonets, which was interesting, but 35 6-hour P229R pistols, which consider a good investment. So my question to Mr. Howard is, I should note, however, that report does not include no-cost transfers under the Federal Defense Logistics Agency's 1033 program, where surplus military equipment is given just cost of shipping to local law enforcement agencies. Mr. Howard, is equipment designed for wartime operations in Syria and Afghanistan appropriate for use in Holly Springs and Roseville?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. All right, so at some point, we do have to protect the officers that go into the situation with SWAT. I was a master SWAT officer for quite some time, and I'm 82nd Infantry. So yes, we do have to protect ourselves. There is not a need for any of those things. It is too militarized, and we need to get back to serving the people. It's about the people. It's not about anybody else. It's not about us. And whoever you select up here, hold them accountable. Hold them accountable. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next question comes from our audience. I'd like to direct it to Mr. Matthews. Mr. Matthews, in Wake County, according to the author of this question, is over 116,000 people, making up 10.4%, it looks like, of Wake County's population. How do you plan on working with the Latino community in your role as sheriff?
Thank you. I want to assure them that police do not come knocking on their doors and asking them what their citizenship is. Everybody in this county, you go to the grocery store, pays taxes. That includes Hispanics, whether here legally or not. I don't know if anybody for a loaf of bread and not pay tax. And I've educated myself when it comes to federal income tax. The IRS gives illegal immigrants, illegal aliens, what you're going to term, a taxpayer identification number that allows them to file federal taxes legally. ICE does not know who these people contribute to our society. And I want them to feel comfortable and know that the sheriff or police are not there to give their presence in this county or state. They contribute. And everybody that I've seen deported that was Hispanic was a male. When that guy leaves this county and this country, guess who picks up the tab to help that family survive? It's your tax-paying dollars. So I want to know that they are welcome and that we are here to protect them just like I would protect anyone else. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Coley, I'd like to ask you the same question. If elected sheriff, how would you plan on dealing with the needs of the Hispanic community here in Wake County?
Wake County, I farmed in Wake County, and I owned a business in Wake County. The business I owned was a landscaping business. I relied heavily on Hispanic help. I got to know them, I got to know their families, and they're all good, hardworking people that I had any dealings with. I agree 100% with Mr. Matthews. I'd like to sit at the table and let them know for sure we'll be open and honest, transparent, and treat them just like anybody else who works, lives, or drives through our county.
Thank you very much. Our next question also comes from our audience. I'd like to ask Mr. Beatty to answer the next question. The question is, have you personally read the U.S. and North Carolina constitutions in its entirety? How can sorry. How can you swear an oath if you've not read that or understood it? Ms. Beatty.
I stand before everyone here today on honesty and integrity. I have not personally read the entire Constitution, but I do understand. I took an oath. I stand by the oath, and I will continue to stand by that oath. I work on. I'm first to admit, it's all about integrity, accountability, transparency. That's pretty much it.
No problem. You were selected at random. I had no prior knowledge of what your answer might be for that, but thank you for your honesty. Absolutely.
Something you asked about?
Sure, if you could do it in like 10 to 15 seconds.
I'm going to have the academy where the indoctrinated kids are coming in. Obviously, everyone needs a refresher course. You're more than to come in, more than welcome to come in. These kids need to understand what they're taking an oath to, because obviously we realized like last summer, they didn't understand that they were in dereliction of their duty. So there's going to be a constitutional course they're going to learn, and they're going to take an oath to it, because you can't take an oath to something you don't understand. You cannot take an oath to something you haven't read.
Thank you very much. Our next question from our audience, I'd like to direct to Mr. Rowe. Question, I'll paraphrase it slightly. Do you support the use of drones for surveillance? The question actually said for illegal, but I felt like yes, so I'll just rephrase and say, do you support the use of drones by the sheriff's department?
Yes, I do. The particular criminal that we're investigating today uses technology and different things that you have to take advantage of technology that exists to keep it safe. For example, we used to call in the National Guard. They bring a plane in that could be 8 miles out of Raleigh and could zoom in and see a drug transaction. We couldn't get close enough to it because of the threat it would be to the officer's safety. But citizen was calling us, complaining about the kids couldn't even play in this yard. Seniors couldn't sit on the porch because of the drug deals going in front of their house, and it was so unsafe. And we had to try to find a way to make it safe. So we was on drones and all technology to do it legally and not, go out for personal gain and intrude on someone's rights, but we need to make it safe. And I got pleasure when we were able to arrest people so kids could play in the community, seniors could sit on the porch. But moreover, I got even more joy when people I arrested came to me and said that the arrest changed their life and caused them to turn their life around and become a productive citizen. So it works for the common good of all if we have prevention and deterrent and enforcement to keep everybody safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have something you'd like to add?
So if elected, I will take and go through the district attorney's office. I will bring my probable cause. I do not want to fly a drone over your house without any kind of probable cause or reason for it, not just a simple complaint. So the information would go through the district attorney's office first prior to me flying a drone over your house. That's what steps I would take.
Thank you very much. Our next question, again, our audience question, I'd like to direct to Mr. Blackwelder. The Wake County Sheriff is a position which is elected by voters in Wake County. Obviously, the expectation would be that the sheriff would work together with the county commission, county commissioners to achieve the goals that Wake County residents expect. What would be the hallmark of your relationship with the county commissioners as you deal with them if you were elected sheriff?
Like you said, working with the county commissioners, and like I said, I've already proven that I can work with them. They sided with me, a Republican, over a sitting Democrat. We got the governor open because They knew it was the right thing to do. And I did work with them because they wanted to have some safety in place. They wanted to have the Wildlife Commission to take it over because somebody, an instructor that was there from the private sector, shot themselves in the leg. So the next step was evaluate who could take that place. Well, the Wildlife Commission, they do this professionally around the state and they do it for free. So it is your tax dollars already going to this. Why not get it in our community? So that's what came in. They came in and now they provide that service for free to the community instead of you paying a fee. Okay. And, you know, I get to work together. I disagree. However, I agree with 80-20. We don't agree with 20%. Why bring it up? Let's work with the 80. Okay. I think it's a bad part in politics to not work together. And I know we all have that political rhetoric. You know, you got to play the game. However, when it comes down to the serious issues that affect these people, you got to do that. You got to do that 80% and do what's right for the betterment of the people. And that's why I also have my motto is public safety over politics.
Thank you very much. Mr. Harrison, I'd like to spend a lot of time working with the county commissioners. If reelected in the next term, how will your relationship with county commissioners?
I was blessed to have a good relationship with everybody that I worked with at the county commissioner's office. I didn't get everything that I wanted, not expected to, but very seldom did I ask for anything unless I had done my homework. And when I say I, it was not I, it was the team that we have put together in the sheriff's office that we knew what we needed to make you safe. And that's what we based it on. Not only you, but the people that was working for the sheriff's office. A lot of times they get overlooked. And that's one thing that I didn't like. The jail is overlooked quite a bit because of where it is and the type of people that's in the jail. A lot of people don't want to work down there. But it's very, very important to have that relationship. We're elected. So is the county commissioners. I walk in that door. I don't care who you are. It's just like any employee that ever worked under me. I never asked them whether Republican, Democrat, if they went to church at the Baptist or the Methodist. Do your job, and that's what we need to do to make sure we're safe and to make sure that the people of this county are safe. And that's the way I'll do it again. Thank you.
Thank you. Asked to Mr. Howard. It's somewhat of an open-ended question, so you get lucky in being able to take that any direction you'd like to. But if elected sheriff, what change would you like to see at the very beginning of your term?
So it's like you said, it's an open-ended question. My first priority is two people from each side of the county to be involved in the sheriff's promotion process. That's the first thing, along with trying to recruit for the military, faith-based, and all of those organizations that make up the sheriff's office personnel. I also would like to swear in a minister, Christian and Catholic ministers, to be a part of the sheriff's office. That serves as a dual purpose for the sheriff's office as far as when we come out to talk to people about bad situations and bad news. They will accompany me through those different situations. So people first, always. It's my mission. It's always been my mission. People first, always over policy, always over mission, my mission. So that's pretty much what I would do starting out with the sheriff's office. But that's it. That's it.
Thank you very much. I'd like to direct Mr. Matthews. We've actually got a couple questions from the audience that reiterate a little bit of what was discussed previously. So it sounds like this is something that's important to our audience here. And so the questions revolve around that when orders are coming from above, I'm going to assume that's either at the state or federal level. You understand those orders as this audience in their words, tyrannical or unconstitutional. How do you deal with mandates when they contradict what you believe is your duty to the residents of the county?
To my knowledge, the only time a local police department or sheriff's office has to abide by any federal mandate is when the Department of Justice has entered in such an agreement with that organization. Right now, Wake County Sheriff's Office does not have any such mandate. And then the Constitution of North Carolina is what the sheriff abides by. We also abide by the Constitution of the country, the federal Constitution. But in some places, the North Carolina Constitution is more restrictive than that of the federal government. So we defer to that. And I've taken an oath since the day I was sworn in 1975 and every 4 years after that, that I would uphold that Constitution. And if most of these mandates are not coming from a regulatory agency. And we enforce the laws, the criminal laws and the civil laws, not some commercial act or OSHA standard. That we've got enough things to do here on the local level, and the DOJ would just have to do something like that. That's not gonna happen.
So the next question, Mr. Taylor, the question is what's your stance on, but maybe I can elaborate a little bit. It says, do you feel that the Wake County Detention Center is doing everything that it is not just obligated to legally, but also morally, to treat prisoners fairly, but still responsible to all the residents of Wake County?
Yep, excellent question. And I think we need to do everything we can, as I mentioned before, to reduce recidivism. That means give people opportunities to make themselves whole again and be a productive member of society. There were a number of different programs that are federally funded. One, to get your commercial driver's license. Can you imagine going in as somebody with a revoked driver's license? Go through the commercial driver's license program, federal funds paying off your restitution, your restoration of your license, any fines, and come out and be able to make $70,000 or $80,000 as a truck driver. I talk to people in the trades all the time. They don't have people that know how to read a ruler. We can have industrial classes in the sheriff's office, in the jail, through Wake Technical College that will give these people, certificates so they can go out and get better. We also have the ability of mental health treatment, either through medication. You heard Mr. Matthews talk about 300 people a day on psychotropic drugs. Is jail really the right place for them? Wouldn't they be better served in a state facility that cares for people with mental health issues? So I don't think there's things we can do. And I say these things not because I'm weak on crime or don't believe it needs to be punished, but we need to make sure that you're less likely to be the victim of a crime. And how do we do that? And that's to eliminate criminals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our final question for the evening comes and directed to Mr. Coley. Well, I'm directing the question to Mr. Coley. The question from the audience but Mr. His question. Would you arrest agents into Wake County to enforce laws that would contradict laws by either the state of North Carolina or ordinances in Wake County? If a federal agent came into Wake County and you felt that they were acting in a way that violated or local law, would you arrest that federal agent? The last one's a doozy, huh?
I was gonna say a good one for me. So just to get this clear, it's a federal law that they're trying to enforce.
Yes. Well, presumably they're in Wake County to achieve some federal goal. So either they're acting legally or illegally based on federal law. you feel that they are acting illegally based on state or local ordinances.
Is if it's hard to answer that question. I really don't understand. You go law enforcement enforcing a law. No, I can't arrest a federal law enforcement officer for.
If they're illegal based on federal law.
I mean, anything illegal, then yes, I would arrest for anything illegal, but I'm not going to say that I would arrest a federal law officer for enforcing the law. I mean, that's just too much gray area for me to answer that. If it's something illegal, I would arrest someone, but that's about as far as I can go.
That's fair enough. I probably should use this analogy in a sheriff's candidate forum. I'm shooting from the hip.
I got you. I understand.
With these audience questions, but of clarifying that last question, which is certainly my fault. Maybe I could ask you, if elected, what would be your top priority as sheriff? What would you want to accomplish first?
One of the first, there's a lot of things that we want to accomplish. Everyone's talked about the jail, of course. It's in sad shape. I started my career there. Light about bringing drug rehab there. We want to bring a chaplains program in. We want to take advantage of the old annex building across from the current detention center on Hammond Road. Bring all the juveniles there. Since they've raised the juvenile age especially, we want to get them away from the grown-ups to where they would be in the same offices as Southlight, have mental health counselors, drug counselors and such. Police academies to get the community involved. I want to bring back neighborhood watch, crime prevention units. There's a lot of things, but unfortunately, the biggest thing we've got to do to begin with is get more deputies on the road. Safer for deputies, it's going to make it safer for the detention officers, and it's going to make it safer for you all. There's some hard times out there right now, and we want to be that shining example where if you've got a limited pool of candidates that are trying to get into law enforcement, we want to know this first, and that's going to be the #1 priority before any of the other can happen. We got to get enough deputies out there and detention officers to make it better.
Thank you very much. Thank all of the candidates. It has truly been my pleasure to moderate this forum with some fantastic candidates. Best of luck. I know we can only have one crown king of Wake County Sheriff. Everyone here listening in the audience, everyone listening online, really appreciates you coming out here, spending the time, giving candid and very honest answers, and really giving us a lot of hope that our Wake County Sheriff's Department continues to be everything that Wake County residents expect and more. Thank you very much.
1 second. My question caught me off guard, but she said, no, I got to get her, because she said she's going to have an academy where they recite the Constitution, and that's part of their program. I will bow to my knees right now. If anyone can give that Constitution verbatim right now.
Oh, verbatim? Which amendment do you want to know? How about the Third Amendment? Which one? Oh, damn it, now I didn't get up to 8. I didn't get up to 8.
Good night. Thank you, Libertarian Party, and I'd like to ask Travis Brew to come up and say a few closing words about Wake County Libertarians.
Thank you so much for coming. As Libertarians, what we stand by is really don't hurt people, we don't take their stuff. And it's really simple. It's what you learn as a kid. It's what your don't initiate force, don't initiate violence. This is the Libertarian platform. I believe Republicans and Democrats is because we actually believe in our principles. We do not believe the force. Whenever you see these riots and these violence going on, this is not libertarians. This is not us. We're over here like trying to protect our property, paint our shed a certain color without. And this reminds me, we're selling shirts. We just want to paint our shed what color we want. We're selling the shirts, lemonade stands. The ridiculousness of government has really, really gotten on my nerves. Where you have to, the government's gonna shut down a lemonade stand if you make a certain amount of money. If a kid makes more than $400, they have to pay money to the IRS, and then they have to get stainless steel sinks and all this kind of stuff if they want to continue their business. And all they're trying to do is raise some money for their. So we're selling shirts, and it's really just business of occupational licensing that is really, really affecting people's ability to make a living. It should not be 200-something thousand hours to cut hair and be able to make money cutting hair. You have to have licensing for this stuff. So we're selling this as an example. They're $15. We got them right over here, and they say legalized lemonade stands, 50 cents. This innocent little girl selling lemonade, and believe it or not, the government will shut you down for selling lemonade, saying it's unsafe. This is not okay, and this is why the Libertarian Party exists, because there are some really ridiculous regulations that affect your everyday life, and you can't even make a living without a license. This is not, if you want to talk about Constitution, let's talk about Constitution. You are free to do whatever you want, so long as you do not hurt people, don't take their stuff, don't commit fraud, force, or coercion. Otherwise, marry who you want. The government has no business. They have no business knocking down your door, and they have no business taking your guns if you haven't done anything. They have no business taking money out of your wallet. That's all I have to say. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. Come back anytime. Thank you. My name is Travis Grew.